If you are willing, let us embark together on a descent not into mere theory or dry knowledge, but into the sonic caverns of the human soul, where the darkness is not merely absence of light, but a living, breathing force. Tonight, I would have you follow me, not as students or passive listeners, but as fellow wanderers, for the journey I wish to describe is one no one can travel for you. I can only illuminate the threshold. The rest lies in your willingness to look where most people fear to glance. We are gathered here not for entertainment, nor for intellectual acrobatics, but for the oldest of reasons, the necessity of self-knowledge. A necessity that is as urgent now as it was when the Delphic oracle first whispered, "Know thyself." Most people, I have observed, live in a peculiar twilight. This twilight is neither full day nor honest night. It is a habitual averting of the gaze from the shadow within. Why? You may wonder, do people so rarely see their own darkness until it is too late, until some catastrophe, some breakdown, some unbidden symptom or dream rises up with the force of destiny and demands their undivided attention? The answer is both simple and profound. The psyche, like nature, abhors the disturbance of its own order. Our consciousness is but a small island afloat upon the sea of the unconscious. And the ego, that fragile, self-asserting fragment, we usually mistake for the whole, builds walls of habit, opinion, and prejudice to defend itself from the primal forces that surge beneath. But the unconscious, you must understand, is not a mere repository of repressed memories or childish fears. It is the living matrix from which all that is vital in us springs, the archetypes, those primordial images and patterns that shape the very possibility of meaning, dream, and myth. In the light of day, we inhabit the persona, the mask we present to the world, fashioned for approval, acceptance, and safety. Yet, it is precisely in this mask that the seed of our blindness is sown. The persona is necessary, but it is also a deception, both to others and most tragically to ourselves. I recall, as a young man, walking along the shores of Lake Zurich at dusk, watching the play of shadows over the water. In those moments, I felt the proximity of another world, one that seemed to pulse behind the visible. This other world, call it the realm of the shadow, if you will, whispered truths that no daylight consciousness could easily accept, for in the shadow lie all those qualities, impulses, and possibilities that we have denied, disowned, or deemed unworthy. The shadow is not evil, though it can become. So, if ignored, rather, it is the compost of the psyche, fertile with all the elements we would rather not claim as our own. The tragedy is that most people, perhaps all at some point, run from the shadow as if it were a wild beast. In so doing, they project its contents onto others. They see in the world, in their neighbors, in strangers, in nations, all that they cannot or will not see in themselves. This is the root of conflict, prejudice, even war. The enemy is always the one who bears the face of our own rejected self. Projection is the mechanism by which the darkness within becomes the darkness without. And so it is that a man who cannot recognize his own capacity for envy, anger, or deceit will see those qualities everywhere, but in his own heart. Such is the blindness that afflicts us. It is only when catastrophe erupts, when the marriage shatters, when the illness descends, when the soul is seized by meaninglessness, that the mask cracks and the frightened gaze falls at last upon the long banished shadow. But let me assure you, the darkness does not come to destroy, it comes to heal. That which we refuse to face grows monstrous only in proportion to our denial. If instead we have the courage to turn towards the shadow, to ask what it wants, to listen for its message, it becomes a wellspring of renewal, a source of creativity, and even paradoxically of love. For one cannot truly love the world or another or even oneself until one has learned to embrace the shadow within. This is not a sentimental acceptance, nor a blanket condoning of all that is base or cruel in us, but an honest acknowledgement. Yes, that too is me. That too is human. Let me invite you to consider a dream, for dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Imagine a man who finds himself in a dark, labyrinthine house. He searches room after room, each more dilapidated than the last, until finally, in a forgotten basement, he discovers a figure shadowy, perhaps monstrous, yet strangely familiar. He recoils at first, but the figure calls to him, not in words, but in a language older than speech. This dream, which I have heard in many guises from countless analysans, is a drama of the encounter with the shadow. The house is the psyche, the basement, the neglected realm of the unconscious, the figure, the very darkness he has spent a lifetime avoiding. When such a dream comes, it is an invitation. To refuse it is to remain forever haunted. To accept it, to approach the figure, is to begin the slow, perilous, but necessary work of integration. You may ask, why do so few accept this invitation? Why do we resist so strenuously the call to self-confrontation? The answer is that the ego fears dissolution. The shadow, when it first appears, threatens the established order of the psyche. It seems to promise chaos, loss of control, even madness. But these are only the fears of an ego that has forgotten its origins. The truth is, there can be no wholeness, no individuation, without the encounter with the shadow. Individuation, the process by which a person becomes who they truly are, as distinct from who they merely pretend to be, is the central task of human life. And individuation always begins with a humble admission. There is much in me I do not know. There is darkness in my soul. And I will seek to know it. I am reminded of an old alchemical maxim, in sterquilinis invenitur. In filth, it will be found. The alchemists, those great explorers of the soul, understood that gold is always hidden in the least likely places. So it is with a shadow. The gold of the true self is to be found not by fleeing from the darkness, but by descending into it, by sifting through the muck and mire of our rejected selves. This descent is not to be undertaken lightly, nor without guidance, for the unconscious is vast and sometimes treacherous. Yet, it is only by this descent that we become truly alive. Consider the archetypes, the great ancient images that dwell within us all. The shadow is but one of these. There is also the anima and animus, the wise old man, the divine child, the hero and the trickster. Each archetype is a door to a new aspect of being, yet until the shadow is faced, the others remain mere abstractions, inaccessible. The shadow guards the gate. It tests our resolve. It asks us, will you risk seeing yourself as you truly are? Will you relinquish your self-deceptions, your cherished prejudices, your inherited opinions for the sake of truth? Most will not, at least not willingly. The journey to the shadow is most often precipitated by crisis, by suffering, by the collapse of what once seemed certain. And yet, if one can see the necessity in such suffering, if one can see in it the hand of fate rather than mere misfortune, then even the darkness becomes a guide. In my own life, I have known this darkness intimately. There were times when I, too, stood at the edge of the abyss and feared what might rise from its depths. But it was precisely in those moments of greatest uncertainty that I discovered what I had lacked, a sense of humility before the mysteries of the soul and a renewed sense of wonder. The darkness is not empty. It is full of potential. In myth, the hero descends into the underworld not to be destroyed, but to find the treasure, to rescue the lost, to bring back something essential for the renewal of life. So it is for each of us. Our darkness, if faced, contains the seed of our transformation. Let us pause here. Do not rush to conclusions or seek immediate answers. Allow yourself to feel for a moment the presence of your own shadow, not as an enemy, but as a silent companion. Consider what it has cost you all these years to turn away. Consider, too, what might be possible if you were to turn toward it, if only for a moment. This is the threshold. The true work begins on the other side. Let us resume our journey now that we have lingered upon the threshold between the known and the unknown. In this dim place, where the boundaries between self and shadow become blurred, you might notice a curious sensation, a restlessness, perhaps even anxiety, as if something within you wishes to rise and be seen, while another force holds it down, resisting with all its strength. This, my friends, is the tension of opposites upon which the psyche thrives. It is the creative tension between light and darkness, consciousness, and the unconscious that generates the energy for transformation. The avoidance of this tension, our habitual turning away from discomfort and contradiction, is precisely why most people never see their own darkness until it is too late. The modern world, with its endless distractions, its cult of positivity, and its insistence on surface harmony, conspires to keep us safely distant from the deeper truths of our nature. We are encouraged to cultivate a persona, to present an image that conforms, that pleases, that offends as little as possible, yet underneath the mask, all gods still steer, the forces of instinct, desire, aggression, fear, and longing are not banished by education or polite conversation. They are only driven underground, where they fester and grow strange. You may notice this yourself in moments of inexplicable anger, in recurring patterns of self-sabotage, in relationships that seem to reenact the same drama again and again. These are symptoms, symbols, in fact, pointing to the presence of a neglected shadow. I have often been asked, but Dr. Jung, how can I recognize my shadow? What if it is hidden even from myself? To which I answer, you must learn to read the language of the soul. A language written not in words, but in images, emotions, and intuitions. The shadow reveals itself in dreams, in slips of the tongue, in irrational dislikes, in the faces of those who inexplicably provoke us. Consider for a moment the people you cannot stand. Ask yourself, what is it in them that disturbs you so deeply? Is it possible that they carry unconsciously some aspect of yourself you have refused to acknowledge? Here is the paradox. The more we deny the shadow, the more we are haunted by it from without. The world becomes filled with enemies, each one bearing a fragment of our own disowned self. Let me draw upon the ancient wisdom of myth to illustrate this point. In countless stories, the hero must descend into darkness to confront a monster, often a dragon or serpent lurking in the depths. This monster is no mere external threat. It is the outward form of an inner conflict. The dragon, the ogre, the beast. These are symbols of the shadow, of everything wild, instinctive, and potentially destructive in us. The true hero does not slay the dragon out of hatred or fear, but out of necessity, and often with great sorrow. For in slaying the dragon, he sacrifices a part of himself. And yet, paradoxically, it is only by embracing the monster, by recognizing it as kin, that he can claim its treasure. I recall the dream of a woman who found herself pursued by a great black wolf. Night after night, the dream recurred, each time more frightening. She sought only to escape, to outwit or outrun the beast, but the dream would not relent. At last, exhausted, she turned and faced the wolf. In that moment, the wolf became docile, even affectionate, and led her to a hidden cave filled with jewels. This, too, is the drama of the shadow. The treasure you seek lies precisely where you least wish to look. The shadow, once faced and integrated, becomes an ally. It grants access to new energies, to forgotten talents, to a sense of wholeness that cannot be found by any other means. Yet, the process of integration is neither quick nor painless. The confrontation with the shadow requires humility, the willingness to admit that you are not always who you appear to be, even to yourself. It demands patience, for the unconscious does not yield its secrets to the impatient or the proud, and it requires courage, for what you find in the darkness may at first seem alien, even repugnant. I have known men who discovered, to their horror, a capacity for cruelty in jealousy or deceit they had always attributed to others. I have known women who, in the course of honest self-examination, unearthed a deep reservoir of rage, or an untapped well of erotic longing. These discoveries are never easy, yet only in facing them can one begin to understand the full complexity of the soul. To make the shadow conscious is to walk the path of individuation. This is not the same as moral perfection, nor is it the attainment of some static ideal. Rather, it is the willingness to become ever more deeply oneself, to risk the loss of all that is false for the sake of what is true. Individuation is a lifelong journey, and the shadow is its most faithful guide. The person who has made peace with his shadow becomes less rigid, more compassionate, less quick to judge. He no longer sees the world in terms of black and white, good and evil, us and them. He recognizes that the very qualities he has struggled with are part of the human inheritance, and that redemption lies not in denial, but in conscious relationship. Some of you may be wondering if the shadow is so essential. Why do we resist it so fiercely? The answer, I believe, lies in fear, not only the fear of pain or discomfort, but a deeper fear of dissolution, of chaos, of becoming lost in the very depths we seek to understand. The ego, that precious construction built up over years of struggle and adaptation, senses that to allow the shadow into awareness is to risk being unseated from its throne. And in a sense, this is true. The work of shadow integration is always a kind of dethronement, a surrender of the illusion of control, a letting go of the fantasy that one can be wholly pure, or wholly good, or wholly rational. This is why, throughout history, cultures have developed rituals of initiation, symbolic descents into darkness, meant to shatter the old self and prepare the way for something new. In the Eleusinian mysteries, the initiate descended into the underworld to meet Persephone, queen of the dead. In the Christian tradition, there is the dark night of the soul, a period of profound spiritual crisis in which all that once seemed certain is stripped away. In modern times, these rituals have largely disappeared, replaced by the banality of routine and the false security of progress. Yet the soul still longs for transformation. And when the call is ignored, it erupts in symptoms, anxiety, depression, addiction, compulsive behavior. These are the modern forms of initiation, the ways in which the unconscious insists upon being heard. I have sometimes described the psyche as a house with many rooms. Most people live only in the bright, well-furnished parlor, ignoring the doors that lead to forgotten attics, musty basements, or hidden cellars. But the house is haunted, not by ghosts from some distant past, but by the unlived life, by the possibilities that have been denied or repressed. The work of individuation is the gradual opening of these doors, the exploration of every room, however dark or neglected. In doing so, one discovers not only what has been lost, but also what has been waiting patiently, often for years, to be reclaimed. Let me speak of the collective shadow, for it is not only individuals who are subject to blindness. whole societies, whole eras are capable of projecting their darkness onto scapegoats, outsiders, or enemies. In times of crisis, the collective shadow erupts in violence, prejudice, or hysteria. The witch hunts, the pogroms, the persecutions of history, all are symptoms of a collective unwillingness to face what is most feared and most denied. If we do not tend to our individual shadows, we contribute in small ways to the great darknesses of our age. To undertake the work of self-examination then is not only a personal task, but a moral one. It is, in the deepest sense, an act of service to the world. The path, as I have said, is not easy. There will be times of doubt, of despair, of confusion. There will be moments when you wish you had never begun, but I would urge you, do not turn back. The way forward is through, and the darkness, when entered with honesty and humility, becomes the source of your greatest strength. Now, perhaps you begin to sense what I mean when I say that most people never see their own darkness until it is too late. It is not that the darkness is invisible, it is that we are skilled in the art of distraction, of denial, of displacement. We fill our lives with noise, with activity, with endless pursuit of goals that in the end leave us empty. But the soul is patient. It waits sometimes for decades until the time is ripe, until the defenses weaken, until some crisis breaks the illusion of safety. Then, and only then, does the shadow step forth, demanding to be known. There is, in all this, a kind of divine irony. That which we fear most is, in fact, our greatest teacher. The monster in the dream is the herald of a new birth. The darkness in the soul is the soil in which the seeds of transformation are planted. To refuse the call is to live half a life, safe, perhaps, but never whole. I invite you then to consider what it would mean to answer the call, not tomorrow, not some distant day when you feel ready, but now, in this moment. What might you find if you were to enter the darkness with open eyes? What treasure lies hidden in the places you have most feared to explore? The journey is yours alone. But you need not travel without companions. Others have walked this path before you. Their wisdom, their courage, their failures and triumphs are available to you if you seek them. As we continue, let the image of the house linger in your mind. You are its sole inhabitant, yet you are also its builder. Is explore, and in a sense, its redeemer. Every room you open, every shadow you face, brings you closer to the heart of the mystery, the realization that what you fear most is, in truth, a part of yourself, longing to be loved, to be known, to be brought into the light, not the harsh glare of judgment, but the gentle radiance of understanding. If you have followed me thus far, you may sense a shifting in the very air around us, as if the boundaries between the visible and the invisible have grown thinner, more porous. This, to is a sign that the psyche has been stirred, that something hidden now wishes to come forth. There are moments rare, but unforgettable when we become aware that our lives are not merely a series of outward events, but the enactment of an inner drama. It is in such moments that the shadow moves, that the archetypes speak, and the soul is awakened from its habitual slumber. Let us pause to consider the peculiar nature of the unconscious, that fathomless ocean upon which our conscious life floats like a small boat. Most people imagine the unconscious as merely a storage room for what has been forgotten or repressed, a dumping ground for the unwanted. But the unconscious is not dead, it is alive, creative, full of intention. It possesses its own logic, its own language, its own will to meaning. You may experience this in dreams, in sudden impulses, in the haunting sensation that something is guiding you, or perhaps obstructing you from beneath the surface. The shadow, as one aspect of this living unconscious, is not content to remain forever hidden. It demands recognition, not to harm us, but to restore us to wholeness. In my years as a physician of the soul, I have watched as men and women of every age, culture, and temperament struggled with this mystery again and again. I have seen that the refusal to confront the shadow leads not to safety, but to stagnation, to neurosis, to a quiet despair that can be more deadly than any overt suffering. There is an old story of a village where a monster lived at the edge of the woods. The villagers, terrified, forbade their children from ever approaching the forest. Yet the monster grew ever larger, ever bolder, until it ventured forth to devour what the villagers cherished most. It was only when one brave soul entered the woods and faced the monster that peace could return. So it is with the shadow, that which is feared, if left unattended, grows in strength and eventually comes to claim its due. Why then do we wait until it is too late? Why do we turn away, not only from the darkness in ourselves, but also from the suffering of others, from the brokenness of the world? In part, it is because we are afraid of what we might find, not just evil or ugliness, but also pain, longing, loss, all the fragile and vulnerable places we have worked so hard to protect. But the deeper truth is that we are afraid of transformation itself. To see one's own darkness is to admit that the current structure of the self is incomplete, that there is more to us than we have yet imagined. It is to stand on the threshold of the unknown and to choose, despite fear, despite uncertainty, to take the next step. There are those who, having glimpsed the shadow, fall into despair, believing that the darkness is all there is. But this is a misunderstanding. The shadow is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the gateway to the deeper layers of the soul, where the archetypes dwell and where the possibility of genuine transformation is found. To encounter the shadow is to meet oneself in a new way, to discover the forgotten, the exiled, the disavowed, and in that meeting, something miraculous may occur. The heart, which had grown hard and defensive, softens. The mind, which had been rigid and dogmatic, becomes supple. The will, which had been divided, is reunited in this process. The symbols of myth and dream are our most faithful guides. For what is a symbol, if not the meeting point between the conscious and the unconscious, the bridge across which meaning flows, the serpent, the labyrinth, the descent into the underworld? These images recur across cultures and centuries because they speak to a universal truth. To become whole, we must first be willing to be undone. The darkness is not an obstacle to be overcome, but a mystery to be entered. It is, in the words of the alchemists, the nigredo, the blackening, the necessary stage of dissolution before the birth of new life. I recall a patient who dreamed night after night of wandering through endless corridors, lost and alone. Each door she opened revealed another hallway, another closed door. She became convinced that she was trapped, that there was no escape. But then, in a single dream, she discovered a window, small, barely visible, at the end of a long corridor. Through that window shone a thin ray of light. It was not much, but it was enough. The dream did not rescue her from the labyrinth. It did not dissolve the darkness, but it gave her hope, and that hope was the beginning of her transformation. The window, you see, was not just a means of escape, but a symbol of new possibility, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, light can be found. The work of the shadow is not a solitary task. Though it is deeply personal, we are shaped by the culture in which we live, by the families that raised us, by the traumas and triumphs that have marked our journey. Each of us carries not only our own darkness, but also the darkness of our ancestors, the wounds of our lineage, the sorrows of our tribe. To face the shadow, then, is to participate in the healing of the collective as well as the individual. The unconscious is not merely personal. It is also collective. Its pattern, its symbols, its archetypes are shared by all humanity. Thus, the work you do in your own soul ripples outward, touching lives you may never know. There is, in the midst of this darkness, a peculiar kind of joy, the joy of discovery, the exhilaration of seeing oneself more clearly, of reclaiming what was lost. I have seen people, having traversed the valley of shadows, emerge with a vitality and creativity they had never known. They become more truly themselves, less bound by fear, more able to love and to serve. The shadow, once integrated, becomes a source of energy, of insight, of compassion. You may notice in your own life that the very qualities you once feared or rejected become, when embraced, the wellspring of your unique gifts. The artist, once haunted by inner demons, channels them into creation. The lover, once consumed by jealousy or longing, learns to love more deeply, more honestly. The seeker, once terrified of the unknown, becomes a guide for others. Let me urge you, then, to become curious about your own darkness. When anger arises, do not dismiss it as bad. Ask what it wishes to teach. When envy flares, Do not cover it with pious words. Inquire into its source. When fear constricts, do not banish it with bravado. Listen to its message. The shadow speaks in many voices, some harsh, some seductive, some pleading for attention. Your task is not to silence these voices, but to listen, to discern, to bring them into conscious relationship with your higher aims. This is not indulgence, nor is it surrender. It is the path of conscious integration. You may find in this work that you are less alone than you feared. The journey through darkness is as old as humanity itself. The myths and legends of every people are filled with tales of descent and return, of loss and recovery, of death and rebirth. When you feel lost, when the night seems endless, remember that you walk a path well trodden by the wise and the brave. In the depths, you are joined by countless souls who have faced the same fears, wrestled with the same monsters, and in doing so, discovered the indestructible core of their being. As you reflect on your own journey, you may notice that the darkness is never static. It shifts, it evolves, it responds to your attention. The shadow, when ignored, becomes a tyrant. When acknowledged, it becomes a guide. In this dance between self and shadow, between light and dark, the soul is shaped and reshaped, ever more fully, ever more deeply. There is no final arrival, no perfect integration, but there is movement, there is growth, there is the gradual unfolding of the mystery that you are. We have spoken much of suffering, of crisis, of descent, but let us not forget that the work of the shadow is ultimately a work of love, to accept oneself, not just the pleasant or acceptable parts, but the whole in all its messiness and contradiction is the highest form of love. It is a love that heals, that unites, that redeems. It is a love that recognizes the shared humanity in every struggle, the hidden kinship in every wound. As we near the close of this part of our exploration, I would invite you to consider carefully the places in your life where darkness still reigns. Do not judge. Do not rush to fix or to flee. Simply observe. Notice what arises. Images, memories, emotions, sensations. Trust that what you find is not there to destroy you, but to call you deeper, to invite you into a more complete relationship with yourself. The work is never finished. The shadow, like the night, returns again and again, each time with a new lesson, a new possibility. Your task is not to banish the darkness, but to learn its language, to become at home in its presence, to allow it to guide you toward the light that only it can reveal. And so, with humility, with courage, and with a sense of reverence for the mystery of your own being, I invite you to step further, to go deeper, to continue the journey that has, in truth, already begun. Now, as the circle of our journey draws inward, let us dwell for a moment in the silent presence, that settles after deep speech and honest listening. You have accompanied me through the labyrinth of shadow, stood at the abyss of your own being, and perhaps glimpsed what lies hidden behind the facade of certainty. The darkness is no longer only a distant threat, but a living aspect of your own nature, capable of undoing, yet also of remaking the very fabric of your life. The fear that once kept you at the surface has, if only for a moment, loosened its grip. What remains now is the quiet question. What is to be done? How shall you live? Knowing now that your shadow walks beside you, not only as adversary, but as companion. If you listen closely, you will hear that the soul does not clamor for perfection, but for wholeness. It asks not that you eradicate your darkness, nor that you dissolve it in the blinding light of willpower, but that you turn to it with curiosity and humility. The path is not one of conquest, but of conversation. The shadow, I have found, responds to honest dialogue, sometimes with images, sometimes with feelings, sometimes with a subtle shifting of circumstance that we call synchronicity. Attend to these moments. If you dream of the night, wake and remember. If you feel resistance or discomfort in a conversation, pause to wonder what hidden voice is speaking. If a certain theme, a certain image repeats in your art, your writing, your imagination, let it lead you. Trust that the unconscious will not betray you. If you are willing to listen with more than your ears, somewhere within you, the child you once were still lives, the child who feared the dark but also dreamed in it, who imagined monsters but also played with them, who loved both sunshine and storm. This child is not gone. It is only hidden. To make contact with the shadow is to remember that you are not and never were divided. What was separated by shame, by pain, by necessity, can be reunited in the slow, organic process of becoming who you truly are. Do not be discouraged if you encounter the same patterns again and again. The psyche is not a machine, but a garden. Its growth is cyclical, mysterious, often invisible, until suddenly, one morning, you awaken and realize you are not who you were. In the ancient stories, the hero does not simply conquer the dragon and leave the cave triumphant. There is always a return, a bringing back of the treasure, a healing of the wound, a sharing of the newfound wisdom with the world. So it must be with you. The insights gained in solitude, in the hidden spaces of the soul, are not meant for you alone. They are gifts, hard won, that become medicine for others. You will notice, perhaps, that as you make peace with your own shadow, you become more capable of holding the suffering of others without judgment or fear. Compassion arises not as a virtue imposed from without, but as a natural fruit of your own inner work. This, I believe, is the quiet revolution for which the world now waits. Not the overthrow of outer structures, but the gentle, persistent dismantling of the walls within each person who is willing to descend, to look, to feel, to suffer, and to reconcile becomes a seed for a new order. The collective shadow is transformed only as each individual tends to his or her own darkness. The wars outside reflect the wars within. The peace you seek in the world must begin inexorably in the temple of your own heart. How then shall you proceed? Not by rushing to action, nor by drawing up a program of self-improvement, but by making a simple inward promise that you will not flee when the darkness comes, that you will welcome the strange guest when it knocks, that you will trust the slow, sometimes painful process of discovery. In practical terms, this may mean setting aside moments each day for quiet reflection, allowing images, memories, and feelings to arise, not as problems to be solved, but as messages to be received. It may mean tending your dreams, recording them not for analysis alone, but for the pleasure of being in dialogue with the mystery. It may mean seeking out those who are themselves committed to the work of soul and sharing your journey in community, even if only with a single trusted companion. You will find over time that the shadow is less an enemy than a guide. It will not flatter you, nor will it allow you to rest in comfortable illusions, but it will, if you persist, reveal to you the gold hidden in the darkness, the untapped energies, the forgotten joys, the secret strengths you never imagined were yours. The path is not linear. You will stumble, you will fall, you will sometimes wish you could return to ignorance. But each time you turn again, each time you consent to see what is rather than what you wish were, so you take another step toward the wholeness that is your birthright. I will not offer you a list of instructions, for the way unfolds uniquely for each soul. Rather, I invite you to notice what stirs in you as you listen, perhaps a memory, perhaps a fear, perhaps an unaccountable longing. Follow that thread. Let your curiosity, not your fear, be your guide. The world within is vast, and though it is filled with shadow, it is also filled with light sometimes in the very places you least expect. The encounter with your own darkness is not a punishment, but a summons to the fullness of life. As you leave this gathering, carry with you the knowledge that you are not alone. The journey you undertake is the journey of every human soul, and though it winds through loneliness and loss, and if you persist, in a homecoming, a reconciliation with yourself, with others, and with the mystery that animates all things. Trust that the darkness is not merely the absence of light, but the soil in which the seeds of your becoming are planted. Tend that soil with patience, with courage, and with a quiet faith that nothing in you is wasted. Nothing in you is beyond redemption. If tonight, as you close your eyes, you find yourself visited by a troubling dream, or an old regret, or a sudden surge of emotion, do not turn away. Welcome it as you would a long-lost friend. Ask what it seeks to show you, what lesson it carries. Listen, not for explanations, but for presence. And in the morning, rise with the knowledge that you have honored the call that echoes from the depths, the call that will not be silenced until you become all that you are meant to be. The darkness my friends, is not the end, but the beginning. It is the place where the journey of selfhood truly begins. The crucible in which the fragments of your being are melted down and reforged. Meet it with honesty, with humility, and with a heart open to surprise. And as you walk forward, step by step, remember that the light you seek is born, always and only from the night that precedes it. Let your soul become your compass, your shadow, your teacher, your dreams, your secret text. For the most profound truths are never found in the glare of certainty, but in the gentle glow that rises when you dare to sit, even for a little while, with your own darkness.